Good afternoon, and welcome to the third event in the 2017 OSEP Symposia Series, convening our stories and displaying our data. I'm Kristen Kushiyama with the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services in the Department of Education, and I will be serving as your moderator for this afternoon's event. Participants will be muted throughout the symposium, but we invite you to submit questions in the Ask a Question box under the Q&A tab near the bottom of your screen. We will try to address as many questions as possible during the Q&A session at the end of the event. Additional questions may be addressed in subsequent discussion opportunities, which you will receive information about next week. In the interest of time, I will provide abbreviated introductions. Brief bios of our participants can be found on the Symposia site. It's my pleasure to introduce Ruth Ryder, Acting Director of the Office of Special Education Programs in the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services at the Department of Education. Ruth will provide today's opening remarks.
Thank you, Kristen. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the third OSEP Virtual Symposium. I'm thrilled to kick off today's event on this incredibly relevant topic. Relevant because I and the rest of my colleagues at OSEP know the kind of impact that you're making. You're changing the lives of children who have disabilities and their families. This symposium is meant to help you tell your story and share it in a way that reaches an even broader audience and with more resonance. I think today's material will be useful for those of you who hope to improve your digital presence and make your data attention-grabbing and effectual. I'm looking forward to learning more from our presenters on these topics and also hearing from our virtual participants who will be submitting questions and sharing information via the collaboration space. Here at OSEP, we recognize the importance of data, as you may know, and we're always striving to improve our communications surrounding these data. Today, we're going to learn more about telling the story behind the data and making the outcomes and efforts that went into achieving those outcomes compelling to stakeholders at all levels. Within the past few years, OSEP has taken a hard look at what and how we're communicating. We've revamped our monthly newsletter, the OSEP Update, and with some fantastic feedback from the field, we were able to transform our old static newsletter into something that is easy to read and contains the most relevant updates from both ED and our grantees. We also collaborate on the department's early learning newsletter. We provided expertise and lessons learned from our OSEP redesign to improve early learning's digital presence as well. Earlier this year, we debuted our brand new IDEA website and continue to make incredible strides in improving the main websites that house resources for our stakeholders. We also rolled out OSEP Ideas That Work and continued to improve the state-focused Grads 360 site. We have forayed into the world of virtual events, including these fantastic OSEP symposia. These live and later archived events allow us to share timely and informative information in ways that is interactive and responsive to our stakeholders' greatest needs. We have a great communications team at OSEP, both OSEP and OSERS, who work hard to share information on Twitter, through our blog, via our websites, and in our newsletters, and to elevate stories and perspectives and successes of those in the communities we serve. We are able to elevate our communications as well as you are. You can help us ensure your colleagues and other appropriate audiences are receiving our newsletter, accessing our websites, and connected with us on social media. If you visit the OSEP website, you will find links to all of these on our homepage. You can also help us improve our communications. Give us feedback about the OSEP update and the early learning newsletter. Let us know how we can make our websites more responsive to your needs. Tell us your innovative ideas of how we can reach all of our stakeholders, including administrators and educators. One of OSEP's communications goals is to extend our reach. Your assistance with this will make all the difference. One communication strategy which we've implemented to a certain extent but hope to improve upon is to create a social and digital media plan. Kristen, who you just met a moment ago and is part of our communications team, shared with me her perspective on the importance of a social media plan. She said that coming up with a plan like this is actually the most neglected communication strategy in almost every organization. Though it can be a lot of work up front, this type of plan can be very helpful down the road, no matter if your team is small or very large with many cooks in the internet kitchen. Surprisingly, creating a plan to develop and establish your organization's social media voice actually allows for more agility and flexibility down the road because content or themes are already in the works. It also helps you to consider the limitations of your social media strategy so that you can figure out the best way to work within those limits and quickly adapt messages as necessary. States, districts, personnel preparation programs, and technology and TA providers can develop engaging stories and effectively use data to improve their communication strategies. They can also tailor their communications to the stakeholders, leadership, or decision makers they are hoping to influence. Today, you will be hearing examples of tailoring messages and making them effectual. You'll hear a how-to social media presentation and then have the chance to hear from two states, Florida and Wisconsin, about their social media strategies. You'll learn about how to tell your story through sharing data in a user-friendly way, the infographic. And you'll hear about several resources that walk you through data visualization strategies. You will also learn about the larger communication strategies of several organizations that have broadened their reach over time. So here is what we're hoping you'll take away from the day. There are resources that can help you make your data accessible, understandable, and useful for your target audience. There are larger strategies you can use to plan for your communications and extend the reach of your organization. And finally, you can tell your story and help your stakeholders take appropriate action so that you can reach your larger outcomes. Thank you, and I'll turn it back to Kristen.
Thank you, Ruth. Next, we will show a short video titled Planning for Effective Communication, which explains how targeting an audience and deciding which engagement strategies to use can lead to real-world change. This video was created by Lisa Schimmel and Cora Goldston from the American Institute of Research.
Before change can happen, people need to understand the key issues at hand, become motivated to take action, and recognize how they can make a difference. Effectively communicating with your audience is a crucial part of translating what you know or have learned into stakeholder action. Communication isn't a one-way street. The goal is to actively engage your audience as much as possible. Ongoing exchanges allow you to build stronger connections to your audience. In turn, your initial audience will be more likely to share your work with their networks, increasing your reach. So how can you actively engage your audience? The first step is creating a plan. If you work directly with stakeholders, include them in the planning process. Stakeholders can provide insight about the most relevant and effective ways to reach your audience. The first step to developing a communication and engagement plan is determining which audiences you want to reach. You'll want to target audiences that have the authority to take action or influence decision-making. For example, if your work is related to classroom practice, you might want to target teachers, parents, and families. If your work focuses on sharing outcomes to impact policy decisions, you may want to target state legislatures or advocacy groups. Once you've identified your audience, the next step is deciding which communication and engagement strategies to use. You can use multiple strategies to reach different audiences. For example, researchers use several communication and engagement strategies to share this research report. The report explores trends among high school students who took accelerated courses in Minnesota. In addition to the main report, the team created an infographic to highlight the key findings. Infographics allow you to tell a clear and visually appealing story about your work and make key takeaways accessible to a broad audience. The team also wrote 2 blog posts about the report. One post was written by a researcher. The other post was written by a stakeholder from the state educational agency. The stakeholder wrote about how her state will use the findings, demonstrating how the research could be relevant to administrators and other stakeholders. Researchers also shared the findings and answered questions at several research conferences. By sharing the report with other researchers, the team could spark future studies on accelerated course participation. You're doing great work. Why not make the most of it? Identify the audience that can make the biggest difference. Actively engage your audience and turn your work into real-world change.
Welcome back to the OSEP Symposium on Conveying Our Stories, Displaying Our Data. Hopefully you had an opportunity to view the materials posted in the pre-work section of the website. If you did not, they are posted on the Symposium site for you to refer to as a resource. All of the speakers' PowerPoint presentations will also be posted on the Symposium site following today's event. Next, we have Jill Lammert, PhD, Senior Study Director at the Center to Improve Project Performance. Jill is a research methodologist and WestStat Senior Study Director with 18 years of experience designing, conducting, and analyzing research to support education policy and practice. She has participated in the design and implementation of federal, state, and local evaluations of education programs and provided technical assistance in research and evaluation methodology to OSEP grantees, project evaluators, and OSEP staff, as well as grantees of the U.S. Department of Education's Investing in Innovation program. Jill will provide an overview of a new resource that can help projects communicate effectively about the results of their work.
Good afternoon, thanks. Before I get started, I'd like to thank my co-authors, Sarah Heinemeyer from Compass Evaluation and Research and Tom Fiore from WestStat. They've both been involved in a lot of the projects the Center to Improve Project Performance has developed, and so I just want to acknowledge them. Next slide, please. So OSEP recently published on its website, Ideas at Work, this new resource that the Center to Improve Project Performance, or CIP, has created. It's called Effectively Communicating Evaluation Findings. So you can go down there and download the resource if you'd like. So today I'll walk you through it briefly, highlight some of the key things that we included in it, some strategies for focusing on your audiences, building upon the video that you just saw, and some tools and resources that are available for you. The document is divided into 6 sections: understanding evaluation data and their function in communicating project success, developing an effective communication and evaluation plan, communicating about evaluation data with current project managers and staff, communicating with project funders and benefactors, communicating with current and potential participants and project replicators, and then communication challenges, ethics, and tools. Projects are often collecting a lot of really valuable data through their evaluations, and without a structured plan to communicate this information in a timely manner, you might be missing out on some really good opportunities to share what you're doing. This tool that we've developed can help you to take your evaluation findings and think about how they can be shared for the good of your project and for the field. Next slide. A first step is to have a high-quality evaluation so that you can have good data and subsequent findings that are of value to those with whom you'd like to communicate. A necessary precursor to everything that you do related to communicating what you're doing is to have a comprehensive evaluation that results in high-quality data. The tool that we're presenting today presumes that grantees will be working with, are working with, or will be working with an internal or external evaluator, hopefully both, and that you will have an ongoing relationship with this evaluator throughout the life of the project. We encourage you also to work with your project officers and with your evaluator during planning and dissemination of your project evaluation activities. So we start out by discussing why it's important to communicate about evaluation findings. Some of the reasons to do this is that you can ensure high-quality services are provided, promote demand for project services, ensure accountability for investments and results, and share important information with stakeholders about what you're doing. A comprehensive evaluation plan is an essential part of this process. Next slide. But keeping track of an evaluation and communication plan while you're also implementing the project can be challenging. So we recommend starting out very early with your evaluation and communication planning and doing it simultaneously so that you know what you're wanting to communicate and how you're going to do it. Some important questions to ask as you plan to communicate are what information from the evaluation do you want to share with your audiences and how will you communicate it? Will the evaluation data you are collecting answer the questions that your audiences will have? And what are the pros and cons of providing or not providing a specific piece of information to specific audiences? So we have some different tools that can help you think through some of these ideas. Next slide, please. So this is one of the tools. This is just a portion of it that is a strategy sheet to help you think through what you want to communicate, starting with the idea of an evaluation concept. So some of the topics that you might want to communicate include what the project has produced or is producing, initial reactions to the project, whether or not the project is on track for success, what the project has achieved, the project return on investment, and implications for project sustainability and scale-up. As you look across the columns, you see that you can then start thinking about what approach do you want to take to communicate the information. So if you want to continue with the example of what the project has produced, you might want to describe what the project has created or delivered or how many people have been served. Then you should think about what kind of format you'll use to present the data or information. Do you want to use tables or do you want to use narrative summaries of qualitative data? Do you want to show demographic characteristics of the people that have been served? Then you could think about what kind of communication tool you'll use, such as a presentation, a webinar, or a post maybe on your project website. You also should think about the frequency of communication. This will likely depend on the audience that you're communicating with. So you'll need to think about that as you go forward. Next slide. Section 2 talks about developing an effective communication plan. A key part of this is determining who are the project's audiences and what are their needs for information about the project. To simplify greatly, audiences fall into two basic categories: audiences that are directly connected to the project and audiences who are indirectly connected to the project. Of course, the categories aren't mutually exclusive, and different audience members can fall into one category at different times in the project. For this resource, we focus primarily on those audiences who are directly connected to the project, but these tools and strategies can also work with other audiences that you're working with. Next slide. Once you've identified your audiences, there are a few questions you should ask. What does the audience need to know? How will the audience use the information? And what is the best way to communicate that information? As you think about this, some additional questions you might ask are, what types of data are most convincing to each audience? How much data are needed for each audience? What's the best timing to communicate? What tool might be the best one for communicating with a specific audience? What cost considerations should I keep in mind? Next slide. Another way to link your evaluation and communication plans is to start by thinking not about the evaluation concept you want to convey, but about which audience that you want to target. This approach might be more appropriate if you have limited resources for communication or if you're not yet sure what you want to communicate. So with this sheet, you can see we start off by thinking about who the audience is, and then you walk through what you might want to communicate, what that audience typically wants to know, how they're typically likely to use the information, and what they might do about it. What data they might find convincing, the frequency of communication, and so on. So this tool, it has a number of different audiences listed, and it provides suggestions for this information across these audiences. You can either use this sheet for internal planning with your project team or your evaluator, or you can actually use it to ask your audience what they prefer. Next slide. Section 3 addresses how to communicate about evaluation data with current project managers and staff. So typically, as you think about communications with these internal audiences, you want to ask yourself what project elements are working well, which ones need attention and support, which elements can and should continue, and which should be modified, scaled back, or eliminated. As you work with your evaluator to plan your evaluation, then, you should consider how the data are going to be collected and what data are going to be collected so that you can make sure you can answer these questions. Then, using the data that are collected, you can plan how to convey the information about project implementation to your staff so that you can make adjustments accordingly. Next slide. This figure here that's maybe a little bit small and hard to read is part of a figure that shows one way that you can use evaluation data to communicate your findings with your internal staff. So as you can see in the figure, the data collected for different aspects of the project are giving different information about implementation. For example, the fidelity of implementation, or FOI data, are showing that implementation in project sites is exceeding the FOI thresholds, in which case staff should continue with implementation as is. A message to staff about this data might be that the project is actually functioning better than expected, or it also might mean that it might be necessary to revise the fidelity thresholds upward if implementation is proceeding higher across all project sites. Combining this information with qualitative observation data or other implementation data you collect through your evaluation can provide helpful information to staff on what they might do next. But on the other hand, you see the benchmark data in the same figure shows that the benchmarks or targets are consistently not being met. This might result from project staff not having sufficient capacity to be able to implement the project as intended, or it might be as a result of barriers on the ground. A message to staff based on this data might be that major changes will be needed to address the issues, such as providing additional supports to better monitor progress and facilitate implementation, or providing additional supports to staff to help them implement the project. Usually, if data collection is carefully planned in advance, your evaluation will collect these data that you can use to inform ongoing implementation. Next slide. As you think about communicating with project managers and staff, it's important to consider context. Namely, it's important that project staff understand what happens during implementation and are aware of the external factors and circumstances that may affect how well services are provided and whether and to what degree project participants can engage in and respond to services. Purposeful communication about evaluation data can help inform project staff about these and other contextual factors, allowing for adjustments to project activities, approaches, objectives, and communication strategies along the way. Next slide. The next section talks about communicating with project funders and benefactors. By benefactors, we mean such as OSEP, other lead agencies, academics, possibly policymakers, policy analysts, that kind of thing. Generally, the questions this audience wants or needs to have answered include: what does the project do? Who does the project serve? Is the project successful, or can or will it be? What does the project cost? And what are the opportunities to enhance or expand the project's success? Next slide. So we included a table with some information about the different types of data that are typically used to answer these types of questions and a number of associated sub-questions, and then also considerations about when the data might be available to inform these questions, again, to help you think this through. Next slide. We've also outlined some important things to keep in mind when you're communicating with funders and potential future funders. For example, establishing a plan for regular communications early in a project lifecycle can help project staff create a constructive working relationship with funders. It's difficult to avoid at least some barriers, pitfalls, or challenges during a project lifecycle, so don't wait to communicate with funders until after you receive data that are suggesting that things might not be going well. Start out early and work with them. There may be constraints on the types of communications that would be considered lobbying or advocacy, so learn about them and respect what they are. And then think that funders typically invest in projects to help them accomplish specific goals. So using your evaluation data to show how these goals are being met helps garner support. And of course, as with other audiences, context is important. We talk more about that in the document. Next slide. In section 5, we talk about communicating with current and potential project participants. There are many reasons why you might want to communicate with these participants, such as conveying how important they are to the project, garnering support for the project or advocacy among the community, or giving them the information they need to be able to participate successfully. When communicating with project participants, it's best to use their primary language whenever possible. This might require hiring translators, interpreters, or some other sort of related services to help with accessibility, but it'll improve your ability to communicate with your audiences effectively and ensure that they truly understand the message you're trying to convey. You should plan to communicate in multiple modes, and don't assume that all audiences are going to be able to understand and learn your message. Oops, we're having this fall down. From the different modes. And then you should also consider what types of communications are appropriate or allowable. So let's go on to the next slide. So here we have a table that walks you through some considerations associated with communicating contextual information with this audience. There we go. All right, so let's go to the next slide and talk about communicating with potential replicators. Evaluation data can answer questions that are particularly important to those deciding whether to replicate or expand a project. Since expanding a project or demand for expanding it is a marker of a success, it's important to think through carefully from the beginning how you might want to communicate with these audiences. They have their own needs for uses for information. For example, they want to know how and when to start, lessons learned and strategies to improve implementation, general and specific barriers and supports, and estimated costs. And of course, for this audience as well, contextual information is also very important to communicate. Next slide. The last section briefly discusses some challenges to communication and ethical considerations related to communicating about your project's evaluation. Some common challenges include limitations related to the project and the evaluation itself, contradictory findings, or negative findings. The most important thing to keep in mind is that evaluators cannot promise to deliver positive findings, so don't ask them to. Okay, next slide. Here's a table that summarizes some common tools for communicating evaluation findings. It includes information about potential audiences and just different things that information that they might use. So it's a good resource that you can use. A simple Google search will give you information about how to create these tools and use them effectively, or you can consult a communication professional or even your evaluator for ideas. In closing, next slide. Please keep in mind that it's important to develop your communication plan and evaluation plan together, ideally anyway, so that you can be sure that your evaluation is going to produce and collect the information that you need and want to communicate. Different audiences have different needs for evaluation findings, so target your strategies and tools accordingly. And then finally, communicating evaluation findings purposefully and effectively can benefit both your project and the field as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill, for bringing down the house so early on in our program. As they say in the theater, the show must go on. Thank you. Our next speaker is Clement Coulston, who is the manager of communications and public relations at the National Association of School Psychologists. Clem is a national presenter, curriculum developer, and content organizer. He has consulted for the National Association of State Directors of Special Education to further its lead by convening work through utilizing infographics and social media. Clem will focus on how organizations can take large amounts of information and transform them into usable pieces to communicate for awareness, education, activation, and more.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. One of the things that I'm really going to be focusing on is how we can take those large pieces of information and make them into digestible pieces so that we can engage our stakeholders and activate them. And on the next slide, I think we need to take a little step back and go to the communication. So communication, it's a core of how we interact with one another, how we learn from one another, and how we can convene folks together. I also think of it as a couple other things as well. Communication can be used to curate awareness, to bring light into areas that may have not been shown before. The other thing is communication can be used to enrich the perspectives, thinking about what do I know today, how can I synthesize what I want to be able to do today in order to inform my work moving forward and for tomorrow. The third thing is creating connections. So we have all these different pieces of information, but it's hard to sometimes piece together the linkages between them, and that is our job today, especially as we inform and engage our stakeholders. And the last thing with communication is opening the opportunities. And I have a little picture icon of a door where it's about us seeing the opportunities to convene together, to be able to look at data and say, what is the data telling us? What can we now do moving forward together? And on the next slide, we're emphasizing the fact that we have these stories, but what our job is how are we going to aggregate them in a way to communicate a comprehensive picture? And I love the little visual on the left-hand side of the screen, which is a picture of a house along with the sun and a couple trees. So oftentimes we have these different pieces of information, but how do we bridge them and put them in one so that it makes sense, and then we can then engage moving forward? And the second piece is how do we leverage these stories to communicate the systemic impact? And again, this visual that I really like seeing is being able to see, okay, here's the one circle, and now how what we do now is going to influence the next one, and the next one. Again, it's that building up effect that we work together. So the next slide really comes to the core of what we're here today. How do we bring life to these stories that we are sharing? How do we make them in ways that our stakeholders can not only understand them, but also be able to engage in conversations with us so that we can improve outcomes for all students? So this kind of goes back to my leading by convening approach with the IDA partnership, focusing on authentic stakeholder engagement, where it's about meeting people where they are on the issue. So translating these complex ideas into ways that folks can resonate, as well as interact and move forward. The second part is also bringing together people to identify the support for the issue, identifying the different perspectives that each person brings to the table, because each one of us does have a unique perspective, and we have to ensure that we allow the opportunity for those perspectives to be shared and heard. So this, through visuals, what we are doing on the next slide, it's really about how are we ideating these infographics, crafting them, and then disseminating them. And today I think you're going to hear a lot about how it's not just about pushing out content, but it's how are we making the content accessible for folks so that they can understand and then again be able to work on that. So I think of it as a 5-step process on the next slide. So first, it's about aggregating your data, pulling everything together to see what do I have to pull from in order to start making my infographic. The second is identifying your expected outcomes, and this also has to do with who is your audience and what do you want them to know or be able to do. The third is develop a structure for how you want the infographic to be presented to effectively communicate that information to the particular stakeholder group. The next one is how are you going to connect the content to the visuals? This is often the hardest part, but can often be the most powerful piece in making the content click and making those connections. And the last is dissemination and continuous enhancement. How can we do better? What is working well? What isn't? And what is our next steps? So on the next slide, we're going to be focusing on step 1, aggregating the data. And this can come from the data can come from multiple sources. Oftentimes it comes from presentations. It can come from social media outlets. It can come from reports. Yesterday, I brought out my flash drive because it's like, oh, there's a couple things that I want to talk about today. And then the next thing is different reports. And I put them all in one file so that I can then be able to say, okay, what am I working with and what is next? Which goes to the next step. So the next step is identifying these expected outcomes. And this is the cloud that I have in my mind about what is the purpose of this infographic? Is it to provide new knowledge so that participants can engage in a dialogue and a conversation? Is it about sparking an urgency with your stakeholders so that they can take action and move forward? Or can it also be about displaying your successes and highlighting the opportunities, bringing the awareness? Sometimes infographics can incorporate all three of these things. Sometimes they incorporate one or the other, or they can also focus on other outcomes as well. But again, it's about being intentional and identifying what is this purpose, who are the stakeholders that are going to be receiving this, and what do you want them to be able to do with it or to move forward. Next slide. So then it's about developing the structure of how is it going to be placed. How are we going to put together these pieces of information so that folks are able to understand what's happening? So the first part is identifying an introduction statement. So this is the why. Why are you showing this infographic? Why are you creating this infographic? Often a one sentence is the best way to go because, again, it captures the reader's interest and then helps them move on to the next parts of the infographic. The middle section, I often call it, of the infographic is the highlights. What are the pieces of information that you want folks to be able to know or to understand? And the third piece is the implications and the actions. So we identify the purpose, we identify the priorities and highlights, but the last piece is, okay, so what's next? What do you want folks to be able to do with it? Next slide. Okay, this is about connecting the content to the visual. So on the left-hand side, you'll notice that I decided to create a priority, assign team members to different tasks to accomplish the goal. So then I was thinking like, what is a way for me to be able to display this information so that folks can be able to remember it and then engage with it? So I came up with a couple of search terms. I typed in people, and then I was like, oh, how about name tag? Because when I think of a name tag or name badge, that's that each person has a role, has a title and responsibility, and putting them together, they're on a team. The next thing is content. So how do I update documents to reflect a new timeline? And I was like, oh, this is a really hard one. So then I came to the idea of, oh, how about I look for the terms such as refresh, new, and recycle? And then I saw that little icon that has the paper with the little circle diagram, again, indicating what the content is about through a visual. And this goes to our last step, which is dissemination and enhancement, to determine how to best disseminate the infographic and what to include with it. Oftentimes, what we'll do is on one side of the paper, we'll have the infographic, and on the second back part of the infographic, we'll have a little bit of a write-up. Again, it's about identifying what the stakeholders can use with the infographic to move forward. And oftentimes this dissemination phase is talking with our stakeholders and saying, hey, what are different ways that we can work together to share this out? And the last is, as stakeholders engage with the material, be mindful to what resonates and surprises, and think about how we can continuously enhance this to move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Clem. Now we will view a video presentation from Kevin Hager, Managing Director of Understood at the National Center for Learning Disabilities. Ken leads strategy and operations across the Understood ecosystem to support parents of the 1 in 5 kids with learning and attention issues. This video shares lessons learned from the development of Understood, an organization that seeks to engage and support parents of children with learning and attention issues. The video is titled 3 Lessons to Meaningfully Engage Stakeholders.
Hi, I'm Kevin Hager. I'm the Managing Director of Understood at the National Center for Learning Disabilities. I wanted to tell you a little bit today about how we at Understood have really optimized understanding our users, attracting them, and then engaging them into the resources in ways that I think could be really applicable to the work that you all are doing. So I thought we'd break that down into 3 key lessons that we've learned over the last not quite 3 years since we launched Understood. The first lesson is to really deeply understand your users or the people that you serve before you build a thing, whatever that thing is. There were a lot of assumptions out there about the people we serve, which are parents of the 1 in 5 children with learning and attention issues. So a lot of people thought, we understand what parents need, let's just give it to them, a la medicine. What we said is, let's really understand this from the parent perspective so that whatever we create really serves them. So the first thing that we did there, and this is lesson number 1, really understand your users before building something. The first thing we did were focus groups. Across the country, you can do them informally in your own community, but getting together groups of parents and really exploring key issues. For us, it was unpacking the journey. What are the pain points in the journey with your child? What were the highlights? What worked and didn't work? Just kind of open-ended questions that would provoke us to think about how we could serve them better. Along those lines, we also asked a different group of parents to journal for a week. So we asked a few dozen parents, write down everything that happens and everything that you feel when it comes to your child's journey with learning and attention issues. Those journals were invaluable. They helped us to really understand things that maybe we didn't realize parents were going through, particularly the social emotional challenges that many kids with learning and attention issues were facing, that parents, had talked to people about that hadn't really surfaced for the field before. So journaling was really, really key. And then what we did were large-scale surveys of our users. So we were able to do a representative sample of 2,200 families who had kids with learning and attention issues. There were really cheap and scrappy ways to do these kinds of surveys online, everything from SurveyMonkey to Qualaroo. But what we did, we were able to test some of those assumptions that we made through the other research and then go a little deeper. So I'll give you an example of some of the questions that were really helpful for us. One is, we asked parents, where are you going right now for information? What are you finding? We also asked parents, how do you talk about these issues? What language is scary or keeping you from taking action, and what language feels safe? For us, that's why we use the phrase learning and attention issues. We tested over 30 different phrases, including learning differences, learning difficulties, learning disabilities, dyslexia as an umbrella term. And what parents told us was, learning and attention issues actually feels right. It's a safe way to kind of enter this landscape. We're quick on Understood to tell parents when they need to use the phrase learning disabilities or the word dyslexia, but that's why we lead with learning and attention issues. We also tested questions like, what features or what functionality could you really use to help you navigate this journey? We tested ideas like, would a personalization approach like Netflix does be helpful for you to navigate content? Would you go to YouTube versus Facebook versus an individual site? But it really helped us to make sure we were talking directly to the users that we serve. The next lesson, lesson number 2 for us, was learn from the best out there. Particularly in education, there are so many smart people like yourselves that have spent decades doing this work. Bring them together. We brought nearly 100 of the top experts in the country together to really mine them for, what were the pain points that you see in families? What has helped most? What's the greatest lesson you've learned over your decades in service? Now, we took a really broad approach to experts. So some of them were academic researchers, some were therapists, some were video game designers, government officials, psychologists. We talked to market researchers. We talked to a lot of parents at the beginning of the journey, and parents that were major advocates in this space. Brain researchers, attorneys. I think it's really important to get that broad spectrum, but don't be afraid to ask. I think those experts are very willing to share their expertise. The next thing we did was really look at kind of the best practices out there from those experts. So for instance, when it came to digital engagement, because we knew we wanted to build a digital resource, we said, who's doing this best? Who's attracting users at scale? who's engaging them deeply, and how are they doing that? So we reached out to everyone from, the people behind letsmove.org to people at Netflix and people at babycenter.com to understand kind of how they created certain tools that we thought were pretty amazing. Lesson number 3 is never stop listening to your users, and I cannot stress this enough. So after we did all that research with users, we built what we would launch 3 years ago as Understood. Every single day, we're doing work to keep listening to our users, to check assumptions and see what might be changing, or what we might have missed, or where we could go deeper. There are some really easy ways to do this. One is that Google Analytics allows you to understand almost in real time how people are using their site, what they're consuming or not consuming, how much time they're spending on each page. It's a really wonderful tool. We also built in a button on every page of content that asks, was this helpful, yes or no? We actually see a pretty large number of parents tell us, yes it was, or no it wasn't. And when they say no, a box pops up and asks them, why wasn't it helpful? So we're constantly looking at that. We look at every piece of over 3,000 pieces of content to see what's falling below, 85 or 90% of approval rating, and then how we can make that better, what users are telling us. We also constantly run surveys on site. So we're asking users everything from where they're at on the journey to how they've just enjoyed the piece of content or the expert event that they consumed, how we can make it better. We're doing that every single day. There's also a great tool called usertesting.com. It's very cheap, and what it allows you to do is really take an idea that you've either launched or are about to and put it in front of a number of users. You pick the demographics, you pick the qualifications, and really within less than an hour, you can get that in front of a bunch of users on the internet who will then walk through that tool or that piece of content, tell you what they think, you hear their audio as they're kind of scrolling through it, and you're able to, again, really test assumptions and go deeper with parents. So whether it is, the way that we're going to reshape our expert events, or we're thinking about a new template to serve up content, we can put it in front of a few dozen parents and say, what do you think? Is this easier than the first way we did it? Is it more complicated? It's kind of a gut check because, you tend to get inside of your work day to day, but really, really helpful. The other thing I highly recommend is A/B testing whenever possible. So we do this really across the board, whether it's, an email subject line, copy in an email, or a new button on the website, or, a new, a photo that we might be unsure of. Internet functionality allows you to really test two things against each other. So half of your users are seeing one, half are seeing another. And I can't tell you the number of times we've been pretty sure they were going to like one approach, and in fact, a significant portion like a different approach. Again, it's just a way of really testing assumptions and making sure you're hearing from your users what's best for them. And then I would say along those lines, don't be afraid to constantly ask, how are we doing? We run a large national ad campaign, and every month we do a survey to people that have seen that campaign and those that haven't. And we're asking them, are they more likely to talk to their child's teacher about learning and attention issues or not? Are they more likely to talk to a pediatrician, another parent? Are they more likely to assume their child might have learning or attention issues? We want to make sure we're staying on top of that because the whole point is to break down stigma and make it easier for these parents to get the resources that they need. We are also constantly asking our users how we're doing. We just did a survey of 1,000 users and said, in what ways, if any, has Understood helped you be less stressed? Are you more or less confident as a result of using Understood? How is your child doing in school since you started using Understood? So again, there's so much cheap, easy functionality out there to help you really stay connected to your users or the people that you serve. I highly recommend that you embrace it. So just to kind of recap, lesson number 1 is really understand the people that you serve before you build a thing. Lesson number 2 is really ask important questions of the top people in your field. And lesson number 3 is never stop engaging with your users to be even better. Keep learning from them every day. I hope this was helpful. Please feel free to reach out to us if there's any other lessons we can share about the brief history of Understood. Like I said, we've been around just under 3 years now. But I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for having me.
Welcome back. As a reminder, the resources for today's event are located on the pre-work section of the website, and the resources will be permanently housed on the OSEP Ideas That Work website. Our next speaker is Todd Grindal, EDD, a senior researcher at the Center for IDEA Early Childhood Data Systems, SRI International. Todd is a senior researcher and co-director of the Early Learning Group at SRI. Today, Todd works with the Center for IDEA Early Childhood Data Systems, where he is leading a quasi-experimental study examining the associations between participation in early intervention services and kindergarten outcomes. Todd will share tips and provide an example of how complex data can be shared in efficient and meaningful ways.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. So I'm going to echo many of the things that you've heard from the previous presenters, but focus really on data visualization. And here going to be sharing work that's been led by my colleague at the Center for Early Childhood Data Systems, DAISY for short, Carrie Belodoff. So next slide, please. So in this world, we don't lack for information. The challenge, increasingly, is in making that information, making that data meaningful. Though challenging, this is really essential because this is what helps the stakeholders we work with to understand that information and to use it to make decisions and help to improve services for children and families. Next slide, please. So we can think of this challenge as this challenge in presenting data or complex information in an efficient and meaningful way that is appropriate for your audience. That's what we're really trying to do here. And so what we're going to offer is the way that we think about it at the DAISY Center and point you to some tools that you may use in your work. Next slide, please. So there's 3 things that we begin by thinking about when we get some data and we think about how to present it and make it meaningful. So the first is our audience. Who is it that we look to share these data with? The purpose of sharing these data, and the message. What do we think these data communicate? Understanding the appropriate level of information for your audience and considering the purpose is really key to helping determine what data visualization tools are appropriate in that context. Next slide, please. So in our work, we have many different audiences for our work, for these data. Sometimes these audiences are people working in programs or staff that you're working with. It may be policymakers to whom you're trying to communicate the effectiveness of your work, or it may be parents to whom you're trying to help understand what's involved in the process. In thinking about what data visualizations you're going to create, so begin with asking questions of, so who is the audience? What is their role? What are their most pressing concerns? And how does the data speak to those concerns? Why does the issue matter to them? What is their perspective on this information? And do they have a particular point of view that you want to speak to with the data visualization? Next slide, please. The second thing we think about as we create data visualizations is the purpose. What is the purpose of us sharing this information? Why do we think this information is important to the audience? And what is it we think that they might do with the information as a result? Finally, next slide. And then the message. What do we see as the folks who've worked with these data and thought about them? What do we see as the key point? What are we trying to communicate? Is there a key takeaway that we want the audience to think about from looking at this? Is it that we want the audience to be asking additional questions? Again, these are going to shift depending on what your context is, but thinking about these three things can help lead us to creating the visualization that's most effective and most meaningful for our group. So we'll show you an example. Next slide, please. Show you an example of how we've thought about this for certain sets of data. So like many of you, states all report data on outcomes for children from birth to 5 that they achieve as part of the early intervention and early childhood special education programs. Data are reported on 3 functional outcomes: positive social emotional skills, acquisition and use of knowledge and skills, and taking actions to meet needs. Outcomes are measured and reported with 2 broad summary statements. So the percentage of children who make greater than expected growth between entry and exit from the program, and the percentage of children who exit functioning at expectations. So we're going to walk through some different ways that we might use these data that many of you who are participating in this webinar engage with every day. Next slide. So often the first temptation is, let's just put it all out there. Let's take these data and carefully organize them into a table so that we can see how they all fit together. So in this example, we've taken the data with all of the multiple outcomes at 3 different time points and reported the percentages. Now, for folks who work with data every day, your data analysts or statisticians, this is enormously helpful for trying to begin to see what the story is. But, next slide, please. If you're trying to communicate this to a non-technical, non-data analyst audience, it can be challenging to extract meaning from this information. So as I said, this can be good for exploration or working with the data internally, but for other audiences may be overwhelming. So one of the next steps that people often take is, well, let's put this data into Excel or some other data processing format and use the chart function and see what it produces. So here's an example of what would happen if you took all that data, put it into Excel, and made a line graph. So I'm going to pause for a moment and let folks look at this and see, can you extract some meaning from these data? So, and I would think about, what's the message here? And for me, I look at this, I see a bunch of lines. I have trouble telling a story from this visualization of these data. The point here is that it's not just about making a chart. It's making a chart that helps to tell the story that you see in these data. Next slide, please. So let's think about some other options. So one is, let's reduce to a single outcome, and let's clearly describe what we see there. So here, we can think about an audience of a state interagency coordinating council. And our purpose here is to share progress in social emotional outcomes over time. We can describe the changes over time as they relate to activities the state has undertaken. So maybe you're working in a state that's undertaken work to try to improve data quality, or maybe states have been focused on improved performance. So here we've done a couple of things. We've made them into simple bar graphs, and we've put above them, we've listed what we think the key takeaways are in some example summary statements. So this is a focused data display. It shows that there's been a slight decrease in both the percentage of children that make greater than expected progress and those that function at age expectations at exit. By limiting what we're showing and clearly demonstrating and summarizing that, it's easier for that audience to understand and to do something with it and to make action, to take action with it. Next slide, please. Let's say we're taking from that table that we looked at before and we want to communicate something to parents. So here we want to share progress on children making social emotional outcomes during their time in preschool. And so the message here, combined with an infographic, is simple and clear and speaks to the types of questions that parents may be asking and the things parents may want to know from these data. Next slide, please. In other cases, we want to provide our audience with the opportunity to interact with that data. And increasingly, there are many tools, some of them free and available to the public, that allow us to create interactive data visualizations. So here we give an example of some data that folks might use in this context, and I believe the URLs will be placed in the chat window here for you to explore these data yourselves. In this case, the audience may be for the general public that you're looking to engage in your topic, but it may also be for people working within programs who you want to allow to explore the data to address their own questions. Next slide, please. As part of the work of DAISY, we've created a data visualization toolkit. Again, the URL is displayed here on the bottom and will be placed in the chat window. In this toolkit, we walk through examples and principles of creating effective data visualizations using each of these various techniques. So we show resources for creating maps. Maps often an excellent way to communicate information. Interactive data displays like the one I just showed you. Dashboards, infographics, animation, charts, color, presentations, and data tables. I encourage you to take a look at the material on the website and explore that and find the data that helps you tell your story. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. As another reminder, we invite you to submit your questions in the Ask a Question box under the Q&A tab near the bottom of your screen. Next up, we have Jane West, PhD. Jane is a visiting professor at the University of Maryland and a policy advisor to several international education organizations, including the American Association of Colleges for Teacher Education, the National Network of State Teacher of the Year, the Higher Education Consortium for Special Education, and the Teacher Education Division of the Council for Exceptional Children. Jane will share ideas on how to effectively communicate with legislators to achieve a broader purpose.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here with us. Let's see, can we get my slides up there? Maybe. There we go. Make your voice heard. That's what this is all about. So let's go to the next one. So you've heard a lot about making sure you know your audience and targeting your message to your audience. So this is one of the audiences that is really important in terms of magnifying the impact of your work, and that is policymakers and more specifically legislators. I like to think about the main goal as you go and meet with a policymaker is to build a relationship. So I think of that first meeting as a first date, right? You want to have a good time because you want a second date and a third date, and who knows where that will go. So you think of it not so much as a meeting, it is a meeting, but it's also the beginning of something wonderful, you hope. So you approach it as a beginning. What you want to do is make a connection with the legislator immediately in terms of why they should care about what you do. Other than the fact that you're a constituent, why does it matter? For example, what is their role that connects them to you? For example, you might say, you chair the Appropriations Committee here in the state, and I want to let you know the impact of some of the funding you're distributing on your constituents. In other words, you want them to know that the money's being responsibly and well spent. That's just an example. You also want to provide answers to questions. Now, many times legislators will ask you questions that you don't know the answer to, and that's quite all right. You want to get back to them. What you're also providing them is not only your own expertise, but your network of other experts. And if you say you're going to get back to them, be sure you do. Next one. So what is it that legislators would want to know anyway? First of all, they want to know how they're connected to you. They want to know the difference that they and the body in which they serve, if it's the state legislature, they want to know the difference that they're making. And so you want to let them know what that is in a very explicit kind of a way. Legislators are also, they're there to solve problems of public significance. So what is the problem of public significance that you are working on? Now, this may be a very big picture thing. We are working, for example, we have a critical shortage of special ed teachers in our state. And without the teachers who really know what they're doing, we're not going to get good outcomes for the kids who will then be able to get jobs and be productive citizens. So we are working to address that shortage, and this is what we're doing. So you're part of the solution. That's what you want them to see. What is the impact? What difference has it made? Let's go back to the teacher shortage example. Well, last year we prepared 43 teachers, and we've done that every year for the last 3 years, and we follow up. We know they're staying in the highest need classrooms, and these are the outcomes they're getting for kids. Now, we should all wish we have exactly that kind of data, but you do the best you can to tell the story of the difference that your work makes. The other thing, if you're in a situation where your project funding or support might be threatened, you want to address what would happen if it wasn't there. The shortage would be so much worse in the Richmond public school districts, and we would anticipate lower performance for students, so it's critical. If it's a federal situation, you might want to say, this is a unique federal role in the state, just isn't in a position to pick this up, particularly if it's something like research. Okay, next slide. Know who you are meeting with. Don't go in randomly and wonder whether the person's a Republican or a Democrat and wonder if they sit on the right committee. You need to do your homework. The two people up on the slide there, I hope you all know who they are. That's Senator Lamar Alexander from Tennessee and Senator Patty Murray from Washington State. Senator Alexander chairs the Senate committee that is responsible for IDEA and all other major federal education legislation called the HELP Committee. Senator Murray is the lead Democrat on that committee. The two of them work together to create, or to take the lead, and I think they are mostly responsible for creating the Every Student Succeeds Act. That was a bipartisan effort, sort of unique in this day and age. They are both very seasoned legislators. If you do your homework, you may find out, for example, that Senator Alexander was the former Secretary of Education, that he was the former president of the University of Tennessee, that he was the former governor of Tennessee. So you're talking about a very experienced person here with a lot of opinions and information and knowledge. You might find out that Patty Murray used to be a early childhood teacher, and that some of her priorities include foster children. She's been a longtime champion for IDEA as well. So what is their track record? You might find out that Senator Alexander is a proponent of school vouchers and reducing the federal role in education, particularly in terms of regulations. You might find out that Patty Murray is really interested in building the profession of teachers and in professionalizing our teaching skills and capacity. It's important to know these things when you begin to interact with people. You don't have to agree with them. We're not talking about agreeing. We're talking about walking in with a fund of information that will help you put your message together in a way that it can be heard. Let's see. So the other thing, check their websites. They all have websites. Follow them on Twitter. If you're not on Twitter, I'm a big Twitter fan. I really recommend it. You should be tweeting about your projects every day. 140 characters, that's a great way to tailor your message. And as our current president has clearly taught us, Twitter is very important in the political sphere and has never been more so. So follow the members and the policymakers you're interested in. Next slide. Remember, you're a constituent. As a constituent, you employ elected officials because you vote for them. So you vote them in, you vote them out. However, if you are meeting with a legislator on behalf of your project, you are not representing yourself, you are representing the project, which does have an impact on their district, so that's very important. Let's go on to the next slide. So your role, You're a constituent, an expert. You want to be that resource for them. You want to educate them. And you're an advocate for students with disabilities. So in the end, it's all about the students. I really urge you, whatever you're doing, to make sure you tie it back to improving outcomes for students. Developing leave-behinds, we've had a lot of great information about infographics. Next slide. And that was really terrific. I always say 2 pages, no more. Do not bring a journal article. Do not bring, a bibliography of references. 2 pages. You can always get back to them. If you bring a big fat report, it'll sit on a shelf and never get looked at. Do not go on and on about your methodology. If they want to know, let them ask that. Highlight the impact. Always include your contact information. We have a couple of examples here. This is one that this is a template that Hexie put together to use with members of Congress, just, highlighting their program. This is what we do. This is who we've educated this year. This is the difference we've made. And it really brings it back home. So that's one example. Here's another one. This is up on the CEC website. I'm having trouble seeing this. Well, they have the slides and the links. I think I'm going to leave it at that, and it lets you go to this link and explore. They have some wonderful materials that are very effective with legislators and that are statewide, and show some of the challenges in the state and how some of the grants that you have are addressing them. Okay, next one. Advocates. Oh, is that more the same? Okay, that was on 2 slides. That's why. All right. Okay, what's a good meeting? Number 1 is short. I plan on 15 minutes. So you want to get through all of that in 15 minutes. You want to have a very clear purpose. I am here to X. You want to combine data and a powerful story. That is a great combination. Just the data and just the story are not as powerful as the 2 together. You want to listen. You want to ask them, what are your priorities? What is it you're working on? How can I be a resource? Be ready to answer the question, what do you want? Legislators are there to take action. So keep in mind and ask. It could be as simple as, will you come and visit my program? Okay, so keep in mind the ask. Follow up. Always get emails and contact information for whoever you meet with so you can follow up. Let them know the good news. Let them know what's happening. Follow up and just send them a little press release or something so that they stay in contact with you. Next slide. Advocates, not lobbyists. So again, these are different roles. Check the guidelines in your situation and make sure you're following them. And my last slide's about Twitter. As I said, I cannot emphasize that enough. I got on Twitter about 2 years ago, and it really has changed a lot for me. So it's a great way to stay in touch and communicate with a lot of people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. Now we will show one last video this afternoon. This video is from Joseph LaBelle and Ileana Tardillo from the Family Network on Disabilities and Monica Vera Tirado from the Florida Department of Education. This video presentation describes how new social media tools can be used to create greater engagement with families of children with disabilities.
Hi, I'm Monica Vera Tirado, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Bureau Chief for the Department of Education's Bureau of Exceptional Education and Student Services.
My name is Joe LaBelle. I'm the Assistant Director of the Parent Education Network, your southernmost parent training information center in the southern region of Florida. I'm so excited to be a part of this today to talk about some of the things that we've been partnering on, amplifying our services, reaching families across the state of Florida, utilizing social media, and what that's kind of looking like for how we're using it.
And my name is Eliana Tardillo. I work as the Program Director for the Parent Education Network with Family Network on Disabilities. I'm also the parent of 2 children with Down syndrome receiving a special education. And part of my story is my experience as a blogger and social media influencer working in communities. And in this case, we're going to be talking about amplification and how social media has helped FND reach people that otherwise we will not be able to reach.
So I'd like to get started by expressing my gratitude for the invitation to partner with our Parent Training and Information Center here in Florida, which is the Family Network on Disabilities. And so we had the opportunity to do a collaborative session or a conference earlier this year around positive behavior support. And the goal was to really outreach and have a lot of parents and caregivers and other folks be able to access this really important information. And so by partnering and by their use of social media, it was just incredible. They pushed us outside, or me, outside my comfort zone, and really trying new ways of work. You know, the term Facebook Live made me a little bit nervous. But through our partnership and our work, not only was the conference a huge success, but also the impact that it made on families, not only in Florida, but around the United States, potentially around the world, was huge. And a big takeaway, of course, is for me, is as the Department of Ed State Director of Special Education, is this wonderful opportunity to work with and partner with your parent and training and information partners. It's so important that our community that supports students with disabilities and their families, that we work together and that we are utilizing and leveraging our resources, our energy, our focus on those common goals rather than working in silos, or in some cases maybe even being perceived as being on separate sides of the issue, because we're all on the same side, which is to help ensure that every single student gets a quality, excellent education, and all families are supported through that process.
Like Monica had said, we had our conference on positive behavior support in March, and the conference, we live streamed every session using Facebook Live. We also had a simultaneous Twitter party where we were tweeting out every 10 minutes throughout the conference for 3 days straight. Now, how did we manage and evaluate impact through that data? Well, Facebook Live and Twitter have different analytics sets. They have different sets of data that you can collect. So as we were going through the conference, it was really, really interesting to be able to, as you could see how many people saw your videos, and you could see where people were watching your videos from. Were they in a certain county in Florida? Were the majority of the people male, female? What age range were they in? Facebook gives you so much information on the back end to evaluate your reach and your impact as you're serving families utilizing social media. So as I was collecting this information, collecting this data, we really saw the excitement from participants and excitement from presenters grow and grow and grow. And now we're really strengthening and fortifying relationships with partners who saw a true impact from this conference and want to move forward and do other collaborative events utilizing social media. So the Insights tool inside of Facebook Live have a lot of information, and you can use other platforms to evaluate your reach on Twitter as well and see how many people are seeing, exposed to, and can get information from your tweets. So bringing it whole circle, you want to make sure that you're evaluating what that looks like as you're going along, so that you can have that true data of reach and impact.
Well, obviously data is really amazing and exciting. We all want to see those big numbers going on. But we think about social media as a way to amplify our efforts, because it means that by opening a camera, you're actually reaching people that many times they cannot be there in person. Many times, because we are serving families of children with special needs, we understand that it's really hard for families to show. They cannot be there in person. It's not that they don't want the information. It's because they are raising a child with behavior challenges. They are still in this time of life in which you don't feel comfortable yet going to places because you don't know how your child is going to react. You don't have a child care. So we have to be very open and realistic about these needs of our communities, and that's when social media becomes so important. And you're still using the same amount of of money. You are investing this money in a very smart and efficient way, because in the case of PBS, we were using this money, and if I'm not mistaken, if we will have, like 200 people, we were investing like $40 per person. Then when we use amplification through Facebook Live, it came down to cents, like to 20 cents. So that's the power of amplification, and we completely understand that many times it is intimidating to be in front of the camera, and we are all, like scared, and we fear about making mistakes. But it's also giving your organization that voice that is the real voice, the human voice. And we want families to see that there's real people behind. There's a Monica, there's a Joe, there's a Liana, and we all have been part of the process of special education. So we really want to open this personal connection and be able to help everyone to amplify their efforts and be successful. Be honest, believe in the power of your voice. Remember that right now we are living in times where technology has all the information out. So for families, it's not that hard anymore to find the information. What they want to hear is from you. They want a real person presenting the information. They want that person saying, I have been there. So being a human, being honest, and creating that relationship is what we can really give to families, because otherwise they really have access to the information. So we are the ones who are irreplaceable, and that's the voice of experience and the empathy that we are providing as parent, resource specialists, and leaders, etc.
I would echo everything that my colleague just shared, but also if social media is a little bit scary and you're a little nervous about it, I guess my best advice would be to just try it. Give it a chance. Surround yourself with people who are enthusiastic about it and have some practice, and don't be afraid to make a mistake, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised that the outcomes are going to be really, really wonderful.
My best advice is to empower your employees, empower your staff, give them a voice in your organization as you're moving forward with this model, and make sure that they have the tools and your support as a leader in your organization to really move with this, to really affect and have the best outcomes and impact on family involvement as we can. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Welcome back live. We are joined once again by Clement Coulston. He will present a summarizing reflection on today's speakers and videos. Clem?
So today, we really had an informative conversation, and we learned and gained some new knowledge. We were also able to see some examples of what does this look like in the field and in the practice. But what also I'm going to bring today is talking about, okay, so we talked about infographics, we talked about ways to visually display data, ways to be able to take big pieces of information and display them in ways that folks can interact and engage with. So now I'm putting it into practice, and I want to show you a couple examples of the things that I just created just now. So the first thing is talking about questions, actions, and resources. Again, I think about ways that what do we need the user to know to be able to think about and be able to do. So questions to ask. How are you learning about your audience, and why are you sharing this information with them? The next one, how are you translating complex informations in ways that resonate? And then what are the leave behinds? Some actions to take. Developing an effective and comprehensive communication plan. There was a general theme throughout today's presentation that I hope you'll also do. The other thing is never stop engaging your stakeholders. Learn from and with them. And for those who are on Twitter, you may notice I used a little retweet icon, because again, it's a learning and sharing network of us together. And the last one is utilizing social media as a way to see how are you reaching your stakeholders. And as someone said earlier, was this page helpful? The last is resources to review. All of today's PowerPoint presentations, as well as resources that were listed and referenced during these presentations, are on the OSEP Ideas That Work website, which I highly encourage you to check out today. On the next slide, I brought about some key themes from today. Setting the priority. A key message that we've shared is that being able to visually display information is not just a nice thing to do, or it's a thing that we need to do. It is a high priority that we can do, and that's what we're going to do moving forward. Next is knowing your audience. Again, who are they? Identifying the purpose. What is the goal of the communication? What is the goal of the information that you're trying to present and engage others with? The next thing is, how are we maximizing and utilizing the talent? Oftentimes it's within your team, but you have to be able to allow the opportunity for that to come out. Review the lessons learned, another key aspect that someone mentioned today. Reflecting about what is working well, what is challenging, and what can we do moving forward. And lastly, continuing to enhance and evaluate. The last one is another way of displaying the information. I kind of came up with some notables. So the first, communicating evaluation findings that can benefit the project and also the field. We also want to develop key relationships with stakeholders so you can be that go-to person, as we just heard a couple minutes ago. There's different ways to present your information. You can use maps, you can use interactive displays, you can use infographics, all different ways to present the data so that we can engage with it. Another one is to convene stakeholders to continuously check for assumptions, identify what was missed, but also identify the opportunities for collaboration. And the last one, which really resonated with me, and I hope it does with you as well, is before change can happen, people need to understand the key issues, become motivated to take action, and recognize how they can make a difference. So on the next slide, it's pulling it all together. The reflections. What are my takeaways? What are those aha moments that happened during the presentation today? Thinking about what are some of the ideas that maybe challenged what we already knew or gave us some insight of, oh, that's a different way to think about X, Y, or Z. What are the surprises? As I was listening to today's speakers, I had a lot of interesting surprises that I'm like, oh, I didn't think about it that way. Now, when I move forward in my work, I'm connected by what I just learned today and use that moving forward. And the last thing is making connections. And that is the common premise of what today was about. Is it's not just about disseminating and giving information to others. It's about building relationships with them. And how can we do that in a way that benefits both parties, as well as helps us work together to grow together to improve outcomes for all students. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Clem, for that great demonstration. Next, I've asked our speakers to come back out to form a panel for our Q&A. We've received numerous questions throughout today, and we will try to answer as many as we can. If you still have questions, please submit your questions to the Ask a Question box under the Q&A tab near the bottom of your screen. So thank you for joining me. The first question is for Jane. Are there other methods or communication tools you recommend to reach legislators besides meetings and Twitter?
Those are two of my favorites, but there certainly are. Pretty much every legislator has a regular way of being in touch with their constituents through town halls or even newsletters with Q&A. Websites, you can submit questions on their website or comments. So that's one way. Legislators who work in Washington are always home in the district too, so if you're interested in making contact with one of your national senators or representatives, like this week they call it district work period, we call it recess, but they like district work period. So they're at home in the districts and they're available for meetings, so you don't feel like you have to come to Washington. Another great thing to do is to invite them to visit your program. They love to have photo ops, especially with kids. So take them to a classroom, have them meet the parents you're working with, get the press there. They really, really like that. Another one that I knew, one group that used to give them awards and invite them to accept the award. Now, the award should be legitimate, in my opinion. But so there, you can be really creative with strategies. Just assume that they want to know what's happening in their district. That's their job to represent it, whether they agree with you or not. They need that information because they can do their job better when they know what's happening.
Thank you. Jill, this question's for you. What do you mean when you say that some types of data are more convincing than others to certain audiences?
Yeah, so when you're working, for example, with
funders, you might want to present more quantitative findings related to a rigorous evaluation that you've conducted. So it might be an infographic that displays quantitative results, or it might be tables or some other thing, or a GIS map like what Todd talked about with Daisy that shows how your project is reaching people across the country or across different regions of the country. If you're working with, for example, academics who are more interested in learning about specific benefits to a particular population group, they might want some more qualitative data related to narrative stories about people, how they're being affected, or they also might want quantitative data, but they might want something more, either video clips or anecdotes or that kind of thing. So you've got to think about who you're communicating with and what kinds of things that they're going to want to be interested in for the purpose that they're going to use the information for.
Thank you. Clem, do you have recommendations for the best practices when deciding how long or dense to make infographics?
That's a great question. One of the things that I, again, help people to do is think about what is the expected outcome. And in being able to pull the information together, and then you visually piece the information together, then you'll be able to say, oh, this is way too much. Or oftentimes what I do is I reach out to a colleague who has not even seen the infographic before, and I'd be like, so what is this infographic telling you, or what does it mean? What is it asking you to do? And that's a great indicator to be able to say, okay, is it too much? Is it too little? Am I getting to the point where I want to get to as well? But I often say that it's not just a one-shot deal where you're able to sit down in 5 minutes, crank out an infographic. It will take some time, but the impact is immense. So that's definitely continuous enhancement with it.
Thank you. Jane, another question for you.
Yeah.
What if you ask to meet with a legislator and get bumped to the staff? Should you say okay or speak up?
No, you should say great. Sounds good. I used to work in the Senate, so see, I can say that because I'm a former staff person. But, oftentimes it really, legislators depend on their staff for information and advice. And sometimes legislators are so busy. I mean, you think about it, if you're a senator, you got to be concerned about foreign relations, agriculture, you name it. So the time and the knowledge base you bring to a discussion about special ed, for example, is not likely to be particularly broad. However, your staff person, whose job is to cover education and maybe some other things as well, is going to have a bigger knowledge base, a broader sort of set of information to talk with you about. So, sometimes I even say it's better to meet with the staff. So I would just go with the flow.
Jill, back to you. What are some considerations when creating a communication around a contradictory finding from your evaluation?
That's a great question. That is something that's likely to happen, or at least not unusual. You might find some contradictory information that comes from your evaluation. So what we always do is try to collect as much data as possible about implementation, related to fidelity, related to social validity, these kinds of things, so that when you are getting these contradictory findings, you can actually have a little bit more information to inform what you're finding. But also an important part of it is maybe having a plan in advance to what you're going to do if you have contradictory findings or if you have negative findings. Really, you shouldn't consider contradictory or negative findings to be bad per se, because there's more information. You're gleaning some information from it no matter what. So if you plan in advance for how you're going to communicate it, you make sure you design and implement as rigorous an evaluation as possible and collect the data that you need to answer these questions. I think you can effectively address that.
Jane, another question for you, which you touched on during your presentation. Is it worth it to meet with a policymaker who you know will disagree with you? How would one handle that?
Absolutely, yes. And I think the key thing to remember is that you're a constituent. And even when you haven't voted for someone or you think this is a waste of my time, I know that they don't think the federal government, for example, should have any role in education or whatever, you're still a constituent. And the other thing is you never know what sort of personal connection might unfold. I've had people meet with members of Congress and learn that the person went to school with their mother, or, and that is helpful, those personal connections. And you're also an expert. So you're a constituent, but you're also an expert. So by bringing information, not only from your expertise, but from what's happening in the district of the person, you're really helping the legislator and their staff to look good. When they go to a meeting and some other staffer says to them, well, what's happening in your district with this? Well, they'll know. So part of it is just a knowledge base. So if that person was elected to represent you, then meet with them. Now, doesn't mean you'll meet with them forever, but you certainly should do it.
Clem, how can you help your stakeholders to share your infographic beyond their organization?
That is an excellent question. The power of the hashtag is one of the things that I really like to emphasize on, and I loved how we were talking about Twitter. So for those who may not know, hashtag, also known as the #, is, I call it to be the glue of Twitter. It's able to bring together streams of information of the same idea. So if I'm interested in school climate, I can simply search the hashtag school climate to see what are people talking about, what are folks sharing, and what are conversations happening that I may want to be a part of. So the first thing is identifying, okay, so what are some relevant hashtags that anyone can create that pertain to what I'm trying to reach out? Just yesterday, the place I work with, NASP, we recently disseminated an infographic on helping kids after natural disasters. So I used the recent events such as Hurricane Harvey, Hurricane Irma, as a way to see that folks who are looking at those hashtags, they're able to say, oh wait, here's a nice infographic. So that's one way. Another way is to also join Twitter chats. They happen all the time. You can just simply Google Twitter chats and see what are some relevant ones that may be pertaining to this topic that I would want to collaborate and join on as well. Thank you.
Todd, are there specific online platforms you recommend we use to create the data visualizations you've shared today?
So I think as the amount of data available both in the private and public sector has grown, so too have the tools that are available to work with that data. And there are now dozens out there, and they range from tools that are often built onto your computers when you get them, to really advanced systems that are you have to purchase and get some training to work with. What I would encourage people to do is to take a look and to see what tools match up with their technical skills. So, and the technical skills required range from sort of basic understanding of Excel to complex programming, and how that fits with the message that you're trying to convey. On the website that we shared earlier on the DAISY Data Visualization Toolkit, we list some of the more common tools and provide links to them. Many of them have free trials that allow people to try out and see if this works for me, see if it helps to tell the story that I'm looking for.
Jill, what do you do to ensure accuracy of the data being presented?
That's a complex answer. Obviously, a first point is to ensure that the evaluation is collecting good data to begin with. Actually on the OSEP Ideas at Work website, SIP has developed a number of TA products. One of them is a toolkit related to evaluating your special education project, and there's a lot of information in there about things like data cleaning and collecting data, getting that kind of information. So that might be a good resource that people can go to look at. But essentially, it's basically ensuring that you have well-trained data collectors going out and checks in place to validate the data that are coming in and ensuring that they're high quality. Once you get them, you have a database set up that can work to, and then you clean it and make sure there's a series of steps related to cleaning all that are outlined in that toolkit. And then you'll have checks that you have people going back and maybe going back to the original data set and checking to see the original data, then the second data, and kind of verify it. So it's a little bit more complex to summarize in a few minutes, but I would definitely suggest going onto the OSEP Ideas at Work website and looking under the evaluation resources in section the resources for grantees, and seeing some of the tools that are available there to help you learn about how best to ensure that you're collecting and using high quality data.
May I add one thing?
Please.
So I think for researchers, and a problem that some researchers have is failing to understand, particularly for administrative data, the process by which that data was collected. And I think it can be really useful to take that step and to understand where did that student information come from? Who reports that? Was it reported at a school or a program level? And who is that person, so you can get a sense of how concerned might I be about the accuracy of these data, or what might have gone wrong and led us to kind of get the wrong information there. So taking a step back and really understanding the process by which those numbers arrived on your computer screen can be really helpful for heading off problems.
So I guess a quasi follow-on to, once you have that data, how do you focus that data for different audiences, so that different audiences such as parents or teachers, educators, administrators know how to use or understand that data?
Mm-hmm. So I think it is again taking a moment to understand, to think about what their perspective would be on that. And if that's information that you don't have already, it's always useful to ask. And I think you never want to attempt to kind of bring down the data or to say something that's not accurate, but to try to be as clear as possible for what your audience may be interested in. I think some of your points about policymakers, they don't want a long paper with regression tables, but your more technical audience will, right? If you're trying to communicate to other researchers out in the field, they are going to want to see those things to make sure that the information that you provided is accurate. So I think in some cases, one of the things that we try to do is to make multiple versions of it. So we'll often try to make a single-page version of what we're saying, a 2-page, and then the full report that has all of the information, so that people may engage in it at whatever level that is sort of the right level of detail for them.
So I guess once people have that information and that data, oftentimes we'll use infographics. So going to what Clem was discussing, we have a question about how do you ensure that the infographics are 508 compliant, especially for this audience? That's really important.
Mm-hmm. Using alternate text is a really key aspect of being able to describe. So a lot of times, some of the infographics that I created, or the ones that I just showed you today, that was created with Microsoft PowerPoint, which a lot of people have already. There's some unique features that are within PowerPoint that you're able to create alternate text, so you're able to describe what is actually in that visual or in the picture that you're trying to share, so that people who use screen readers are able to still access the information. Twitter, which is a great venue that people use to share tweets as well as pictures, allows folks to use alternate text for attaching images. So that's another thing to consider as well when you're attaching infographics to your tweets or visuals. How are you ensuring that folks are able to interact with them who may be using different ways to interact with that information itself? I also highly encourage, as my colleagues have said today, going onto the OSEP Ideas at Work website. There's a tab that is 508 compliant that talks about using Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and has a lot of different resources as well. I highly encourage folks to check that out.
Great. Thank you. So for all of you, or anyone who wants to answer, do you have any suggestions for updating data in real time or regularly? Everybody's busy. What are your suggestions or best practices for people?
Sure. So I think it depends on, I think like with a lot of things, it depends on the type of data and how frequently you're looking to do that. Some of the tools that we mentioned provide some simple, straightforward ways for that to happen automatically. When you're looking at static indicators, things that are just going to be on a paper or an image on a screen, I think to have those updated on a schedule that's relevant for your audience and that is relevant for if you're looking for the story you're trying to tell. Are you trying to talk about change over time? And then think about what are the appropriate time points and along the way for doing that.
I would add, it's a great answer, Todd. I would add also that it also depends on what your audience's needs are. So if it's a one-time presentation that you're making to show where you are in midterm of your project, well, you don't need to update it. But if you need to keep updating them quarterly, for example, like if you're talking with a group of project participants and they're the ones who are implementing your project in the classroom, and you have maybe quarterly meetings with them, then you will just set up a process to have a quarterly update with them. And so it requires a little work on the back end, but you might have some templates that are set up already that then you can just feed the data into when you run it again. So I think it depends on, like Todd said, what you're doing and what you're using it for, but then who your audience is and what are their needs for data that are updated and with the frequency of that.
The point about having templates is really great, and having them clearly labeled, knowing where they are. So you do the hard work the first time in making your data visualization, and then the second time, in many cases, it can be just adding a column or changing the numbers that are in those cells, so that you can kind of continue to do that. But having that clearly organized, knowing where to go back, can save quite a bit of time.
And one more thing, sorry, if you have a need for frequent updates of data, if there's a reason for that, it might be worth making the initial investment in putting together a data dashboard that is actually fed from real-time data that are entered into your database. And so that the particular user of that dashboard can go in and they click on what they need to click, and automatically those data are feeding in from the database that they have. So if that's something that you need for your project, it really might be worth making that initial investment to create that right up front.
Those are really great suggestions. For anyone, how do you ensure your audiences are actually being reached?
I'll start. One thing that I think is important to do is to, before even getting to the point of reaching them, is doing a test drive with your potential audiences to see if they can even understand the message that you're trying to convey. So you reach out to representatives of your audience and you do a test drive. So you wonder, you ask them, is this message? How do you understand this message? What do you get from it? Does it contain the information that you need? And then is it accessible to you? So that's like an initial point to it. But you could survey them, you could reach out to them. There's different ways that you could find out, but it's going to require a little bit of effort on your part to get in contact with them to follow up. Twitter could be a way, because if you're doing that and you're getting people responding, all of a sudden you're getting followers, you're getting people interested in your message, and then retweeting and sharing, then you know that they're getting the message and you're reaching the message.
Using different tools through social media. So Instagram, they recently had this new initiative where you can use stories to be able to show people almost in live time what's happening. And recently they also included a polling feature. So you can post something up on the screen and then ask them a question like yes or no, immediate feedback so that folks can see what others are sharing, but then also provide you feedback. Was this helpful? And I love what Understood was sharing earlier, that was this page helpful? Again, I think that's a great way to, in conjunction with Google Analytics, to see what are people clicking on, how long people are staying on the page, what page are they visiting next, but also getting that anecdotal, okay, is this page helpful? And then as a team, we can come together and say, okay, so this is what folks are sharing, what can we do to improve upon this? But they can get us using the social media outlets, but seeing what people are using and meeting them where they are, just like we talked about earlier, keeping with the stakeholders, meeting where they are.
So I understood your question a little bit differently, and that was that, is this message that I'm communicating, is that actually what they're hearing? People often can take a look at the same information, I'm sure this is true with policymakers, and it comes through their filter and that may be ideology or experience or a whole bunch of other things, that we can look at the same image, the same data visualization, and make very different conclusions from it. One thing we've tried to do is to create some scaffolds for people when we're providing graphs or other visualizations. So often what we'll do is we'll put a note on the bottom of that says, read this as. And so we'll take a bar and say, this bar says that 25% of the participants in this program achieved meaningful growth. Just to make sure that they're reading it the same way, they're understanding that information, and it's not being kind of taken over by some prior experience or perspective on the issue.
So a little bit of a follow-on, sort of, to this question. Have you worked with teachers on communicating data? Also, what are tips for teachers to portray data to parents? So how do they help explain the message that you are trying to get out there?
So I've had some limited experience doing this, and I think it is to give them the same principles that we think about when communicating to different audiences. And what is it they want? What is it they want to learn from this? What's the story you're trying to tell? And then I think to keep it simple and straightforward.
I think another aspect to that too is meeting them where they are. One of the things that tends to get me a little upset is when people talk about dumbing down information, and I really don't believe it's about that. It's about identifying where the stakeholders are and meeting them so that we can go and grow together. And oftentimes it's about, well, let's look at this. What is the data telling us, and how is it going to be influencing what we're going to be doing moving forward? Especially in IP meetings, it can often feel for the child that they're just identifying all the stuff that's I can't do or it's challenging and stuff, but rather saying, starting the conversation with, these are the strengths. And then even if the child is in an IP meeting, which hopefully he or she is, what are some of your strengths? What are some of your talents? And starting the conversation off in a positive part, but then moving towards the area with the, like I showed before, with the flashlight, shining on areas that maybe we need to focus on moving forward as well. So using data not as a reprimanding piece, but really as a way to shine light on what's moving forward.
Great. That's a great way of looking at it and explaining it. Anybody else have anything to add for that question? Jill, this is for you. How applicable do you feel your tools are across levels in the field? Local education agencies, state agencies?
I think they're quite applicable. Obviously, what we presented today is targeted more at grantees of specific program areas of OSEP, but the ideas are the same across, because the idea is to know who your audiences are, know what they want to know what they need to know, how to communicate it to them, and what tools you might use. So I think it really doesn't matter, that the tool was written for this. It can be used, the principles can be applied across. And I would say that's the same for other resources that we have on the OSEP Ideas at Work website. One thing that's kind of related that is also more broadly applicable is another tool that we developed called Demonstrating Evidence Across the Project Cycle. And so what this does is it kind of walks people through the idea of what does it mean to demonstrate evidence of your project's progress and your results over time. And so we walk through the planning, the implementation, and then the results phases, and kind of think through. There's some resources and checklists and strategy things that you can look through about that, and that's really broadly applicable across all levels as well.
Thank you. So I got my notification that unfortunately we have to come to an end today. The questions that weren't answered will be posted onto the post-work website. I'd like to thank Clem, Jill, Todd, Jane for coming today and presenting to all of us at the 2017, the third event in the 2017 Symposia Series. Late next week, we will be sending you all additional information on how you can participate in the post-event discussion opportunities for all three of our symposia. Thank you for joining us and have a great afternoon.